You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game, and we're fired up and we're ready to go. This show is dedicated to the slogan of Barack Obama, if not to our esteemed 44th President of the United States. But rest assured, we'll be talking about Barack Obama, we'll be talking about public policy and politics, because we have as our guest John Tillman, who's the chairman and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. John came there, what, in the last year or two?
July of 2007.
And he's been shaking things up, raising funding considerably. It's so high, I don't even want to say. I would embarrass John, and then people might not give him money, right? Because they
We always need more funding, Jeff, because there's always urgent needs to pursue a liberty agenda in Illinois.
And John's background, 2 decades or so in business. He has been and was an entrepreneur. Launching businesses was something he did, growing businesses, and then selling out when he increased value. About 4 or 5 years ago, he became active in the public policy side of things and became an activist, I think you could say, for free enterprise. We'll ask John about that. An activist for liberty, an activist for reform. So usually there are politicians sitting in that chair. John is a bit of a politician because he's the village president of Gulf, right?
That's correct.
So
outgoing village president, I should be clear. I'm finishing up my term of 4 years. I self-limited and had a few years as a trustee prior to that, but I'm about to be done as of April.
So you could run longer, but you choose to enforce term limits on John Tillman?
In this case, yes.
And you think that would be a good idea? Would you like to see term limits in general?
Absolutely. I think term limits
for Congress?
For Congress.
For state rep? For governor?
I think it'd be terrific.
All right. We'll get back to more about John as we talk about things in the show. But I think, look, last time you were here, it was just before the election, and we were saying it sounds like there's going to be a cataclysmic election, cataclysmic for the Republican Party, big victory for the Democrats. Would you say that's what happened on November 4th, 2000?
That is precisely what happened, and it might have been averted if the Republican Party had actually put up a Republican candidate, but they didn't. They put up John McCain, who is basically a blend of Democratic and Republican ideas, and when you water down the brand, you water down the voter turnout, and that's what happened to McCain and happened to the Republicans, and it's unfortunate. Obviously, the Illinois Policy Institute is nonpartisan, but if you believe in the concept of limited government, free enterprise system, McCain was a horrible spokesman during the economic and financial crisis last fall, and really hurt the opportunity for free markets to go forward and help solve the problem we currently face.
So you would say the election of 2008 was not a defeat for freedom, for liberty, for free markets. It was a defeat for John McCain, who you say, other than he's an honorable man, certainly.
Absolutely.
Great character, what he's done on the defense side, great military career, but John McCain didn't really stand for what the Illinois Policy Institute stands for, right?
That would be an understatement. John McCain believes in regulating speech. The McCain-Feingold Act is a travesty. It restricts the ability of individuals as well as organizations to participate in the political process. He does not understand how a market works. He was a terrible spokesman for what happened during the financial crisis, tried to blame greedy Wall Streeters, of which there are many. But the fundamental causes of the financial crisis, of course, were bad government regulation in the first place, of which Barack Obama was part. And he did not do a very good job of articulating that message, and it cost him.
Well, your focus is on state things, being the Illinois Policy Institute, but let's talk a little bit about national, because they provide the backdrop, maybe the setting, the environment in which you are competing, so to speak, which will get competing in the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
So you just said that McCain kind of botched the economic issues as he was running. Is that because he supported the bailout and you think that was inappropriate? That would be the $700 billion bailout of the financial sector?
That's part of it, but I think it's larger than that, and this really permeated his entire campaign. It's really been a challenge for the Republican Party and the center-right movement for a very long time, is how do you talk about the way the market economy works? The received wisdom, because the winner gets to write the history, is that capitalism in some way failed. And that is not what happened with this financial crisis. What happened is government failed. They failed to write the right kind of regulations. When Bush tried to more closely regulate Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, it was blocked by the Democrats, and Barack Obama among them. So it was bad government policy that created the rules of the game that allowed the thing to go off the tracks, and nobody has really made that case.
With Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're sometimes characterized as quasi-public-private or combined public-privates. entities. Is
Right.
that right? Are they both public and private?
They're essentially a government-supported enterprise, which means if they go, when they fail, the government steps in to support them. Unlike a private business, when you fail, you go out of business and you go bankrupt. And Fannie and Freddie added trillions of dollars to their balance sheets over the last several years. That combined with the loose money of the Fed, inflationary money of the Fed, and so lower interest rates created the housing bubble in the first place.
Fannie and Freddie do what? They buy mortgages?
They buy mortgages. So you
So
have
when
a
you
mortgage.
say added trillions of dollars of assets,
Right.
they also added trillions of dollars of liabilities, right?
That's that's the main point, right? It's a balancing entry on your balance sheet. So you have an asset, you have a liability, and because of the rules driven by the Democratic Party primarily of loosening the kind of assets that Fannie could buy up in the secondary market, and a loan originator no longer had the incentive to make sure that the person taking on that mortgage was really creditworthy. They loosened up those rules. That was a government policy that did that. And it was
Why did they do that? Well, who was running? Franklin Raines was running it for a while.
At that time,
Other
yes.
Democrats.
Yes.
It tended to be run by Democrats, even though you had a Republican Congress. How did that again happen?
I don't recall
Fannie
exactly.
Mae and Freddie Mac, in a sense, were given over to the Democrats, even though you had a Republican Congress and
Well,
majority?
Fannie and Freddie, Franklin Raines, I don't remember who, I think he was appointed actually by Clinton.
Might have been and stayed over. This
I'm
was
almost,
goes
yes,
back to 0102 is when he left, I think.
I believe that's right. And
But Rahm Emanuel was on the board. Was he also appointed by Clinton?
I don't recall the details of that.
Yeah,
I don't know who appointed Rahm Emanuel. But the bottom line is this: is that it's Democrats who controlled the committee in the Senate, led by Chris Dodd and others, and Barney Frank on the House side.
They did after '06, but they didn't before then. Didn't the Republicans control the Senate?
Yeah, but hear me out on what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that you need 60 votes in the Senate to do any kind of legislation. Bush promoted some reforms that would have limited the liberalness that Fannie and Freddie went on, and that was blocked by Democrats with a filibuster, so they could not get to the 60 votes. So the minority at the time, Democrats, were able to block this reform that would have curbed the abuses that eventually took place and led in part to the financial crisis.
So it's and that blocking was led by Senator Chris Dodd, who was then the ranking Democrat
That's the point I'm making.
on
right.
the Senate Banking
And
Committee.
Barack Obama
now
was
he's the
supportive of
chairman,
that.
right?
Yes, he's now the
Now
chairman.
he's
The
chairman,
great irony
and
is
he's now blaming
yes.
the Republicans for deregulation or something?
Well, when you win the election, you get to tell the truth in whatever way you see, however inaccurate it may be.
Now, what you're saying is said, I'm sure, daily on ABC, NBC, CBS,
No, you really have
CNN,
to-
MSNBC. I mean, this is kind of conventional wisdom because they've looked for the truth. And Chris Matthews on softball, also known as hardball,
Right.
Chris Matthews would be telling this, right?
Well,
he would be asking hard questions of Chris Dodd.
No.
Soft questions, of
Soft
course.
questions.
T-ball
Chris Dodd.
questions.
T-ball questions. In fact, you might let him toss the ball up himself because Chris Matthews has kind of gone down that road. But yeah, of course, you don't see this in the mainstream media because they want to frame the debate differently, and they do want to blame the markets. As Rahm Emanuel said himself, you want to take advantage of a crisis like this, and blaming the markets allows the government to come in with a greater regulatory scheme.
That's what you're up against. Just a brief detour on bias in the national media. I mean, even in Chicago Tonight, public TV, WTTW in Chicago, would you say there's a balanced view on that station?
No,
as
of course
public?
there's not.
So there's not balanced conservatives and Democrats. Carol Marin would tend to be a liberal.
That would be the
Phil
way I
Ponce
would.
appears to be
Sure.
a liberal.
Sure, they seem like
Elizabeth
quality
Brackett
people,
appears
but
to be a liberal. So there would
absolutely,
be a
but-
conservative there. Anybody want to send this in to Public Affairs, jbcg@aol.com. If you know of anybody who you could identify as a conservative or even a mainstream middle-of-the-roader on Chicago Tonight appearing there, let me know, and we'll broadcast that here. Because as John says, they're fine people. I know them, you know them. And maybe it's not their fault, but they're all on the left.
Well, it's funny how much diversity is a sort of a theme of our society today, but when it comes to intellectual or ideological diversity on a show like that, they think they are diverse. That's one of the challenges. They don't realize their own point of view and their own biases, but you can see it in every bit of their
An
reporting.
example, because people want to be specific. About a week ago, we're taping this on March 1, 2009. There was a show specifically discussing Roland Burris as the U.S. Senator and whether it's appropriate that he stay as the U.S. Senator and so forth. And everybody knows that race is somewhat of an issue there, I want to be blunt. Competence is somewhat of an issue. Ideology is somewhat of an issue. And so to discuss that, they had Delmarie Cobb, who used to work for, and I think now does work for again for Roland Burris. That would be pretty fair. Balanced out by Cheryl Corley from NPR, balanced out by Laura Washington from the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, these are fine people. I know them individually, but they would all probably be described as liberal as African American, as female. I mean, some of those traits are indisputable. So might you want a conservative point of view?
You would
And
think.
given so we have so much diversity focus, might be some racial balancing. So 3 African American female liberals discussing Roland Burris.
Well,
Balanced out by Eddie Arusa, who would be the balance. Eddie would be the Mr. Conservative. So, folks, I mean, this is what you should think about when you send your tax dollars, excuse me, well, some tax dollars go to PBS.
Yes, they do.
And to TTW. And when you
Which
send
should
your
stop,
pledge
by the
dollars,
way.
yeah, think about whether they should be going to John Tillman and his 501c3.
That's an excellent thought,
To
Jeff.
balance it out, because
Right.
send your liberal tax dollars to WTTW, and then send your views about liberty and freedom and reform. So we'll get to that right now. John Tillman, there's a big stimulus, $700 billion, $800 billion stimulus program. How does that affect the states? Does it affect Illinois and what it should be doing and what your agenda is?
It does affect the states. Controller Hines thinks somewhere around $3 billion of that is going to come to help alleviate some of the state's challenges. What the final number is, we'll wait to see.
He expects how much? $3 billion?
$3 billion.
And now what's his estimate of the deficit for this year and next year?
His
State deficit.
right, the state deficit he's estimating at $9 billion, of
Is
which
that for next year or for this year?
for the fiscal year 2010, and of that fiscal year 2010, he's assuming that 4.2 billion of it is a carryover from fiscal year 2009 and unpaid liabilities and ongoing obligations.
It's hard to get people, the total budget for Illinois is $60 billion, although some people say it's really only $30 billion because 30 other is not discretionary. Or
Right,
something like that.
there's revenues.
GRF, the general revenue fund's about
Right,
30
the-
billion,
the
and something else
30
is
30 to
billion.
31 billion is what the general revenue fund is. That's controlled by the General Assembly, and so that's where people like to focus. Is
Where's
where
the other 30 if it's not
it comes
controlled
from
by-
the federal government primarily, and,
okay.
and a variety of other specialized funds that they don't have direct control over.
So the deficit is probably 9 billion over 30, or more than a third.
Right.
Or a third.
Right. What I think is so fascinating was, you know, you said today's March 1st when we're actually talking. In today's Chicagoland section of the Tribune, there was a whole article on the budget deficit, and in Controller Hines' own report, he analyzes the budget deficit. And on the WTTW, when they do Chicago Tonight, when they analyze these things, in every case, what they focus on is the revenue side of this equation, that we have a structural deficit, $9 billion short in revenue. How are we going to close that gap with revenues? None of them ever ask the question, how did we get to this spending level that's causing this? And they don't spend their energy on the spending
did we,
side.
John?
Pardon me?
How did we? And if you're watching this, if you're Mary Fields, who I think is the producer of Chicago Tonight, and you're saying you'd like to have conservatives, you'd like to have another viewpoint, but you just can't find them. It's not a qualified pool. Ms. Fields, this is dedicated to you. Here's John Tillman. Listen up. This might be, John, you'd be available sometime.
I'd be happy to
you could
stop
go.
over
You
there.
could go all the way over there to Chicago Tonight, to their studios.
I'm sure I could find my way there.
So next time you're going to have 3 liberals on and a liberal host, Ms. Fields, whoever's running things on Chicago Tonight, John Tillman.
You know,
So what's the answer on the spending
the
side?
answer on the spending side is you have to reform the spending process in terms of the way spending is done, and you have to look for cuts, you know, specific cuts. I don't think we need to spend $550,000 on studying pheasants and protecting pheasants right now.
You don't think so?
No, I really don't think
Pheasants,
that's the way
that'd
to
be
go.
very important. Look, do you don't care about the environment?
I care deeply
Pheasants
about
are
the
important for
environment,
the
but I think the pheasants can fend for themselves when the taxpayers are already overburdened. We have an unemployment rate approaching 8% and going higher.
So in boom times, we'll come back and take care of the
No, we
pheasant.
should never come back.
Never come back.
That's in fact how we got in trouble in the first
So
place.
let
And
the
that
people-
that
let
goes
the-
back to the point, is what is the root cause of this? The root cause of this is that spending in this state has risen by 44% on an inflation-adjusted basis since the last time we had a balanced budget, which was 1998, while population has only increased by 4%. 4%,
again, 4% growth in
We have
population.
4% more people than in 1998, Edgar's last budget, but spending on an inflation-adjusted basis is 44% higher. $3,200 per citizen in 1998, $4,700 in spending
Where did
per
the bulk of that money go? Because I know you've got a book. What's it called? The Piglet book.
We have the Piglet book. That's $689 million in spending we think could be eliminated.
And that's important. But the bulk of that increase in spending in the last 10 years probably didn't go into pheasants. And to be fair, might not even have gone into pork. Where did it go?
It went into pensions. It went into
Pensions for?
pensions for public employees.
And that's very important. if
It's
you're a
very
public
important.
employee.
There are basically 3 places that drive.
Do most people watching this show have a what they call a defined benefit pension, where they'll be getting 90% of their salary for the rest of their lives when they quit? Could the superintendent of New Trier High School, when he retired, it was to retire at $232,000 per year for the rest of his life. Now I ask my crew who's working here and doing their good deed, I'm looking right now at Zach Gardner, who's been contributing to the show on the other side of the camera for the last 3 years. Zach, we have to answer now, but could you get by on $232,000 a year? Do you think maybe Superintendent Bangser didn't earn that much? You don't have to answer now. We'll have Zach on. He can tell me, Or maybe his brother, Mike Gardner, has directed about 800 of, well, not 800 since we've only done 568 shows, but I'd say about 450 of those, contributing as a pro bono member. I wonder if Mike could get by on $232,000. We'd like to have Mike, who went to New Trier High School, as Zach is now, tell us if Bangser earned that.
Well, those are preposterous retirements that are, as you have alluded to, those are defined benefit, which nobody in the private sector has. Defined benefit means that you get a specific amount of money for forevermore.
Usually a percentage of what your last 4 years were. That's how Bangser did it. They jacked up the compensation to phony it up for the last few years, and then he got this egregious retirement. Okay, we don't pick on Hank. He was a guest of the show. He's a nice guy. It's not his fault. It's the morons who sat on the school board who gave him that compensation.
Hank and every other...
So you might want to call if you live in New Trier Township, you might want to call them and see what they're up to for their next superintendent.
This goes to the core of how these things happen. Hank shouldn't be vilified, even though I know that people want to. He's just playing by the rules of the game the politicians
board should be vilified,
created.
don't you think?
It's the board
the New
and the way...
High School board.
Absolutely, for allowing that to happen. The board should be vilified, as should be the entire structure of our educational funding system in the state, which creates an incentive for people to try to get their salary up in the last part of their career.
Pensions, big spending on pensions, that's a major
pensions, maintenance on roads, education spending,
just billions. We're really talking gross spending on both.
Yeah. Let me give you one quick.
Just one thing. In the city of Chicago, people talk about we don't have enough, not spending enough. Budget $6 billion divided by 370,000 students, you get $16,000 per kid per year. Do you think that's enough? Mayor Daley, do you think that's enough? Okay. Ron Huberman, he's the new CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. Are you going to go, begging for more money, or can you get by on $16,000 per kid per year? Do you think that's enough?
Illinois ranks somewhere around 20th in overall spending per student. Spending on an inflation-adjusted basis is up 10% since the year 2000, and performance is absolutely flatlining. The problem with education is not spending. The problem with education is the rules of the game by which teachers in the public school system teach. You have charter public schools that outperform hands down and are comparable to very, very successful suburban schools by a host of measures that are public schools, but they don't operate under the charter schools, but they don't operate under the union collective bargaining.
To be fair, President Obama has come out for charter schools, right?
I fell off my chair. I can't wait to see what his actions and deeds are as opposed to the words in that speech.
Now, he was a state legislator for 8 years, so a fair question is, people can write in and ask their President of the United States, what did you do, Barack Obama, to increase the number of charter schools in the Chicago Public Schools when you were the state senator representing the South Side, who is damn in need and still is damn in need of choice in charter schools? What did he do?
Nothing.
Nothing. But he's for them.
Yes, because the rhetoric, the thing we're going to have to watch with President Obama is how much his actions match the rhetoric. He's a genius.
Govern from the center, or is it speak from the center and govern from the left?
I think that's the example we're seeing. I think all the fears about socialism are now well-founded, that people rejected that prior to the election.
To be fair, Paul Krugman, New York Times columnist, generally on the left, had a good thought. During the campaign, he said, is Barack Obama a centrist sort of parading as a liberal, or is he a liberal parading as a centrist? And I think Krugman was a supporter of Obama, but he genuinely didn't know. What's the answer, John?
I think if you judge by what he's doing, both publicly and the not-so-public action since he's been in office, he is clearly a liberal. He said that the federal government is the primary instrument to solve our society's problems. The Founding Fathers based this country's conception on the idea of the supremacy of the individual, and that all good things flow from individuals pursuing their own self-interest so long as they don't cause harm to others, and that individuals, in order to pursue their own interest, voluntarily cooperate with others. The way President Obama sees it, he sees it as the coercive power of government, requiring people to cooperate in a way to do what he and the elites that are now in government think is the proper course of action. And that is what is so scary about the initial part of this administration.
Well, to be fair, to be fair on him, he is saying there are low-income people who deserve some help, not a handout, but a hand to help them up.
No
you
one's
agree with
arguing
that?
with that, absolutely. That's a reasonable point of view.
And he said on this show,
that's of course-
he said once outlined raising the caps on Social Security taxes. Well, fine. Right now, you don't pay, whoever you are, any tax for Social Security when your income exceeds, what, $97,000?
$102,000, I think is the
$102,000
threshold.
now. But he talked on this show in 2003 as a U.S. Senate candidate about what you could do in terms of raising that cap, and he said, but you exempt people then from the Social Security tax at lower incomes, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, raise it on higher incomes, and he said that would mean that would have tremendous significance to help those low-income people. Do you disagree? Maybe you'd buy into that one.
No, I would never buy into raising the cap.
But you would do something to help low-income people pay less taxes?
Well, I'd have to give that some thought, but let me answer that question slightly different. Right now, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people in this country don't pay any income taxes. So those people who are
but they pay payroll tax.
Exactly. That's my point that I'm making, is that they don't pay any income taxes, but they are paying some Social Security tax, which people commonly refer to as a payroll tax. And I actually think it is destructive to the fabric of society to have a significant portion of the population have a free ride. I don't think that's good for anybody.
Let them pay an income tax, but maybe lower the payroll tax?
You know what? I would advocate cutting the payroll tax for lower income people.
Because
but everybody should have skin in the game. One of the problems we have in this society is that not enough people have skin in the game, and that is really one of the dangers we have, is when you don't have everybody pulling the oar in the same direction, and some people are getting a free ride, it sort of cuts at the very core of what America is about, which is the idea of self-reliance. What President Obama has done initially is he's laid out an agenda that is trying to create greater dependence on government, to bring more people into government programs where they count on that government check, and they look to the government for to solve their problems. The very premise of this country is independence and self-reliance. And one of the things I did—
You're going back to Reagan saying government is the problem, not the solution?
You know, I was just going to say, one of the things I did on inaugural day is I watched Ronald Reagan's inaugural speech in 1981, and then I watched Obama's speech. And it's stunning the difference. Reagan almost sounds like a radical right now when you compare it to the rhetoric now. But the essential point was returning to what the founders believed. And what the founders believed is in individual liberty and self-reliance, and that the way—
Make it real, though. I just want to interrupt to say there's a $9 billion deficit in Illinois.
Right.
You said the feds may give $3 to balance it out. That leaves $6 billion more. Are you going to cut spending in Illinois by $6 billion, and where would you cut? Or are you going to allow the government or encourage the government to raise taxes? What are you going to do?
Well, of course,
John Tillman, if you've got to solve that problem, $6 billion deficit, no ifs, ands, and buts.
I'll give you 3 or 4 things right now if you'll let me say them all right in a row. One is I would remove the cap on charter schools. It would immediately save money and put more kids in more effective public schools that cost less. Number 2, I would pass a $4,000 per child tax credit for education. That over 10 years would save $4.6 billion. Number 3, I would institute immediately a 50-state health care program where somebody from Illinois could buy health insurance from any state in the union. It costs thousands of dollars less to buy health insurance in Wisconsin than it does in Illinois.
How much do you save with that item 3?
I haven't put a fiscal note on that, but it's
Just
billions.
let me interrupt to say item 2, my calculation in a year, you save $460 million, because you said $4.6 billion.
Over 10 years.
I don't know what you saved on item 1. And we don't know what you saved.
Well,
on item 3.
I'm not going out the numbers.
I need to hear $6 billion.
Well, you have to let me finish the things, and I'll come back to
this. This is not Chris Matthews. We play hardball even with conservatives. Okay?
Yes, but you have
Chris, this is how you do it, okay? I once learned from Chris in 2001 when I interviewed how to do it. He's forgotten. Watch Berkowitz. Okay.
Yes, but when you play hardball, you also have to throw strikes and let the guy swing the bat, which is what I'm trying to do right now.
I know.
The other thing I would do is I'd immediately get rid of all 40 mandates in health care coverage, because what that would do is lower the cost of basic health insurance and take people out of the Medicaid rolls and put them into private insurance. I would also lower the threshold by which people are eligible for Medicaid in the state, which would save billions of dollars a year over a period of time. Right now, what we're doing with the way Medicaid rules are is we're taking people out of the private sector.
Would you raise the threshold? Would you said lower the threshold.
No, because right now I believe it's up to 300 or 400% of the poverty level that you're eligible, up to $60,000 in income,
lower,
you can benefit.
Your incomes could be very high now, and you want to make the income at which you can enter Medicaid.
Right.
It would
again,
have to be lower.
This is a very policy-driven.
Like 100% of poverty or something.
Yes, exactly. I would go back to that threshold
4 times poverty.
Right,
which is like $80,000 a year, right?
Yes, exactly.
$80,000 a year is poor if you're in Illinois, right?
Theoretically, according to Governor Blagojevich, and they haven't changed the rules yet since Governor Quinn came into office.
All right.
But those are all some things that would, I'd have to take a pencil to that, but there are billions of dollars in savings there. Our Piglet book found almost $1 billion in savings, hardly trying.
And this is what the Republicans who are starting to run for governor would be saying. They've contacted John Tillman, they've adopted, they've tapped into your resources, right?
If they want, I actually have had some conversations with a number of people who are thinking of running.
Can you tell me their names?
No, I can't.
Why not? Inquiring minds want to know.
I know they do, and at some
Come
point
on,
when
you're a
it's
think
appropriate.
tank, you're fair, you're
Well,
not partisan.
Yes, I also, when I tell people I won't discuss
Spill
that,
the
I
beans.
stick with that.
All right.
And I know you can respect that. But
Absolutely.
the point here, though, is if Republicans want to be successful, or anybody, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, wants to be successful, these are the kind of ideas that will rally the base and get an energized base, because people know that the problem with the Illinois government is an excessive growth in spending and too high a tax and regulatory burden, and that's why we rank 47th in job growth since 1977.
And where do we stand in unemployment? We're at the average?
We've generally been in the top 5 states in unemployment. Right now, though, every other state is trying to catch us, so I'm not sure where we are ranking-wise, but it's approaching 8%.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank John Tillman, Chairman and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. Clearly, we need another show, so we're going to have John Tillman back. You'll come back?
Absolutely.
We just scratched the surface here. Right?
Well, there's a lot more to go.
So, and why do they get in touch with you, John?
Pardon? Oh, they go to the IllinoisPolicyInstitute.org, which is an excellent suggestion. They should do that. They can learn about our Liberty Agenda there. We're going to be updating that shortly. We have a new agenda coming out for the current year. We call it the Economic Reform Agenda. You'll be hearing a lot about that. We have a Council on Efficient Government proposal coming out.
You have a new executive director.
We have a new executive director. We're opening our Springfield office. We took possession of this space today, in fact, and Christina Rasmussen from the National Taxpayers Union is our new executive vice president.
You're not partisan, so you invite Democrats and Republicans to get in touch. You'll talk to everybody.
We talk to Democrats on a regular basis.
You've gone on NPR, so you talk to Democrats. You've gone to Fox, you talk to Republicans, right? You come to Fair and Balanced Berkowitz, tough but fair questioning, right, on public affairs, down in Rome. But seriously, you will talk to Democrats, you will talk to Republicans.
We talk to them every day, in fact.
You want to proselytize and change their views, as well as many Republicans.
You'd be stunned by how many Democrats would like to see lower taxes.
McCain's not a real Republican, is he?
That's my view.
That's your view?
Yes.
All right, so you want to change his mind. John, give John McCain, give John Tillman a call, right?
I'd be happy to talk to him.
Straighten him out on campaign financing. We haven't even touched cap and trade. That's a big tax on the federal level. I wonder why they call it cap and trade. Shouldn't they call it cap and tax?
That wouldn't be good marketing. They're too smart for that.
So it's a cap carbon production and tax all the carbon producers. That means utilities, that means manufacturers. So this would be a major tax coming across the board. So when Obama said he's not raising taxes on people with incomes above 200, with incomes below 250,000, that was a lie.
Well, it certainly is a. I'll leave
you
that
agree
word.
it's a
It's a
lie,
misrepresentation. I'll use that more.
Because he is raising
word.
taxes on everybody.
And it's a regressive tax. The irony of Obama in this case is that it's a regressive tax against the very people who can least afford it.
Is it necessary? Is it obviously proved that carbon is a major cause of
It's
doom
a
of the United
preposterous, poorly
There is no global warming?
unproven.
Is there global warming?
There might be some moderate global warming, but there's no way to prove that it's been attributable to the human condition. And more importantly, I think, let's assume for a second it is. We don't even know if it's harmful.
We don't know.
We don't know if it's harmful. It might be beneficial.
Back to Illinois. What do you do to cut unemployment in Illinois, from your viewpoint?
You get rid of the corporate franchise tax. You cut the corporate income tax in half.
From 3% to 1.5%?
I think it's
the corporate. I'm sorry, that was the
tax,
individual.
right?
The corporate tax is like
4.8.